The research vessel Starward moved slowly through the empty darkness of space. It was far from any planet, far from any star, floating in a region called the Outer Reach where few ships ever traveled. The vessel carried scientists from many different species, all working together to study the strange things they found in the universe. But today, the Starward carried something special, something dangerous, something that made even the bravest crew members speak in whispers. In the lowest level of the ship, behind walls of reinforced metal and energy shields, sat a cage. Inside that cage was a creature called a shrike. It was the most deadly predator ever discovered in the known galaxy. The beast stood as tall as 3 men and moved on 6 powerful legs. Its body was covered in scales as black as the void of space, and strange glowing patterns ran across its skin. These patterns changed color depending on the creature's mood. Right now, they pulsed a slow, angry red. The shrike had been captured on a death world called Nix 7. That planet was a place of eternal night, freezing cold, and endless violence. Everything on Nix 7 killed to survive. The shrike was the king of that terrible place. The team sent to capture it had numbered 20 soldiers. Only 3 came back alive. Commander stood before the observation window and watched the creature pace inside its prison. The commander was a tall insect-like being with hard shell covering his body and large compound eyes that never seemed to blink. He had served in the Galactic Union fleet for 40 years and had seen many dangerous things, but the shrike made even him feel small. "The containment is absolute," he said to himself, though his voice carried no real confidence. "It cannot escape." On the other side of the ship, in a small laboratory filled with plant samples and biological equipment, a young human woman named was finishing her night shift. She was 28 years old with dark hair tied back in a simple knot and calm brown eyes that always seemed to be thinking about something far away. Was a biologist, one of only 2 humans aboard the Starward. She studied alien life forms and tried to understand how they lived and survived. Most of the alien crew avoided her. Humans made them nervous. There were many rumors about the species that came from Earth. They said humans were unpredictable. They said humans came from a world almost as dangerous as Nix 7. They said humans did strange things that no logical species would ever do. Did not mind being alone. She liked the quiet of the night shift, and she liked visiting the observation deck near the containment bay. She walked down the empty corridor, her soft footsteps echoing against the metal walls. The lights were dimmed for the night cycle, casting long shadows across the floor. When she reached the observation window, she stopped and looked inside. The shrike noticed her immediately. It always did. The creature turned its massive head toward her, and its glowing patterns shifted slightly. Most of the crew would have run away at this point. The shrike's gaze was like staring into death itself. But did not run, she never did. "Hello again," she said softly. Her voice was gentle, the way someone might speak to a scared animal. "Cannot sleep either, can you?" The shrike watched her. It did not attack the glass. It did not roar or bare its fangs. It simply watched, as if trying to understand this small, soft creature that showed no fear. Had been doing this for weeks now. Every night she came to the window and talked to the beast. She did not know why. Perhaps it was because she saw something in its eyes that the others missed. Loneliness, maybe. Or perhaps just confusion at being trapped in a place so far from home. "I know how you feel," she whispered. "I am far from home too." The ship suddenly shook. The lights flickered once, twice, then turned red. Alarm sounds filled the air, loud and sharp and terrifying. Grabbed the wall to steady herself. "What is happening?" The ship's computer voice spoke in a flat tone. "Power fluctuation detected. Multiple systems failing. Containment field destabilizing." Her blood turned cold. Through the observation window, she watched the energy barrier around the shrike's cage flicker like a dying candle. The creature stopped packing. Its patterns changed from red to bright orange. It knew. It understood what was happening. The barrier failed. The shrike did not hesitate. It moved with terrible speed, crashing through the observation window like it was made of paper. Glass exploded outward, threw herself to the ground as the beast sailed over her head and vanished into the ventilation shaft above. For a moment there was only silence, then the screaming began. "All crew, this is Commander." The commander's voice came through every speaker on the ship, tight with barely controlled panic. "The specimen has escaped. I repeat, the specimen has escaped. All personnel evacuate to upper decks immediately. Seal all lower-level bulkheads. This is not a drill." Pushed herself up from the floor. Her hands were bleeding from the broken glass, but she barely noticed. She had to move. She had to get to safety. She ran down the corridor toward the emergency lift. The red lights made everything look like a nightmare. Other crew members rushed past her, their faces twisted with fear. Nobody stopped to help her. Nobody even looked at her. She was almost at the lift when the emergency bulkhead dropped. The massive metal door slammed down from the ceiling and hit the floor with a sound like thunder, skidded to a stop just before it crushed her. She pounded on the cold metal with her fists. "Hello, is anyone there? I am trapped." No response. The bulkhead was too thick. Nobody could hear her. She tried her communicator, but it only gave her static. The power fluctuation must have damaged it. She was completely alone in a sealed corridor with no way out. The lights flickered again, then they went out completely. Stood in perfect darkness. She could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She could hear her own breathing, fast and scared, and she could hear something else. Something was breathing with her. It was a deep sound, slow and heavy, like wind moving through a cave. It came from somewhere behind her, somewhere in the darkness where she could not see. Did not turn around, she did not scream. She knew what was back there. Running would only make it worse. On Earth, her grandmother had taught her about predators. Running triggered the chase instinct. Running meant death. So she stood very still. She closed her eyes, even though it made no difference in the darkness. She tried to slow her breathing. She tried to calm her racing heart. The breathing behind her grew closer. She could feel the heat of the creature now, could smell its strange scent like burning metal and ancient stone. Something touched her shoulder. It was light, almost gentle. A claw, perhaps, or the edge of a massive jaw. Waited for the killing blow. It did not come. Instead, she heard a sound she did not expect. A low rumble, almost like a question. The Shrike was not attacking. It was waiting. It was curious. In the darkness of that sealed corridor, with the galaxy's deadliest predator standing right behind her, made a choice. She could give in to fear and die screaming, or she could do something very human. She could try to make a friend. She took a slow breath and began to hum. The melody was simple. It was an old song from Earth, one that's grandmother had sung to her when she was a little girl afraid of storms. The words did not matter, could not remember them anyway, but the tune was soft and slow, rising and falling like gentle waves on a calm sea. She hummed with her eyes closed, standing perfectly still in the darkness. Behind her, the Shrike had stopped moving. She could still feel its presence, massive and powerful, close enough to kill her in a single heartbeat. But it was listening. She was certain of that somehow. It was listening to her song. Minutes passed. They felt like hours. Throat grew tired, but she did not stop humming. She remembered what her grandmother had told her about animals. They could sense fear. They could smell it on your skin and hear it in your voice. But they could also sense calm. They could recognize when someone meant them no harm. The Shrike made a sound. It was not a growl or a roar. It was something softer, almost like a question. The deep rumble vibrated through the air and made its bones shake. Slowly, very slowly, she turned around. In the darkness, she could not see much, but the Shrike's glowing patterns provided some light. They had changed color. When she last saw the creature, the patterns had been angry orange. Now they pulsed a soft violet, like flowers blooming under a strange moon. The beast was enormous. Even lying down, its head came up to her chest. Its 6 legs were folded beneath its body, and its long tail curled around its form like a sleeping cat. Its eyes, large and golden, watched her with an intelligence that surprised her. This was not the mindless killer that Commander had described. This was something else, something that could think, something that could feel. "Hello," whispered. Her voice was barely louder than a breath. "I am not going to hurt you." The Shrike tilted its massive head. The violet patterns on its skin pulsed a little brighter. Stayed where she was. She did not approach. She did not retreat. She simply existed in the same space as this creature, sharing the darkness with it. "You are scared too, are you not?" she said. "They took you from your home, they put you in a cage, they stare at you like you are a monster." She paused and smiled sadly. "I know what that feels like. People stare at me too. They think humans are strange and dangerous." The Shrike made another sound, lower this time. It almost sounded like agreement. "We are not so different, you and me," continued. "We both come from hard worlds. We both survived because we had to. We both just want to feel safe." She did not know if the creature understood her words. Probably not. But animals did not need to understand words. They understood tone. They understood intention. They understood the feeling behind the sounds. The Shrike moved. It rose up on its legs and its heart jumped into her throat. But the creature did not attack. It took one step toward her, then another, until it stood close enough that she could feel its hot breath on her face. She should have been terrified. Every part of her logical mind screamed that she was about to die. But something deeper, something older than logic, told her to stay calm. The Shrike lowered its head and sniffed her. Its nose touched her hair, her shoulder, her bleeding hands. It was learning her scent, memorizing her the way predators memorized everything about their territory. Then, to her complete shock, it pushed its head against her chest like a dog asking to be petted. Let out a shaky laugh. Her eyes were wet with tears she had not noticed forming. With trembling hands, she reached up and touched the Shrike's head. Its scales were warm and smooth, not cold like she expected. The glowing patterns beneath her fingers pulsed in response to her touch. The creature made a new sound, deep and rumbling, almost like a purr. "You are not a monster," whispered. "You are just alone." She stood there in the darkness with her hands on the galaxy's deadliest predator, and she was no longer afraid. The Shrike had decided she was not prey. It had decided she was something else. What that something was, she did not know yet. But it was a start. The creature slowly lowered itself back to the ground. But this time, it did not just lie down. It curled its massive body around its legs, wrapping itself around her like a protective wall. Its tail rested against her feet. Its head settled near her hip. It was guarding her. Sank down to sit beside it. Her legs were too weak to hold her up anymore. The fear she had been pushing down finally released, and she began to shake. But she was not shaking from terror. She was shaking from relief. "Thank you," she said softly. She stroked the Shrike's head and it pressed into her touch. "I do not know why you chose not to kill me, but thank you." Time passed, lost track of how long. She heard distant sounds through the walls, running feet, shouted orders, the hum of weapons charging. The crew was searching for the Shrike. They would find this corridor eventually. She wondered what would happen then. Would they try to kill the creature? Would they understand that it was not attacking? Or would they see only a monster that needed to be destroyed? She looked down at the Shrike. Its golden eyes were half closed now, relaxed in content. The violet patterns on its skin had settled into a steady, peaceful glow. "They are going to be scared of you," she told it. "They do not understand, but I will try to help them see. I will try to protect you." The Shrike's tail curled around her feet. Whether or not it understood her words, it seemed to understand her meaning. A loud bang echoed through the corridor. Someone was cutting through the bulkhead. A familiar voice shouted from the other side. It was the other human on the ship. He was an engineer a few years older than her with a gruff manner that hid a kind heart. "Can you hear me? Are you alive?" "I am here," she called back. "I am okay." "What do you mean okay? The Shrike is loose. We tracked it to your section. Stay hidden, I am coming through." Looked down at the creature curled around her. It had lifted its head at the sound of his voice. Its patterns flickered with uncertainty. "It is all right," she whispered to the Shrike, stroking its head again. "That is a friend, he will not hurt you." The Shrike watched her, then settled back down. It trusted her. This massive, deadly creature from a world of darkness and death had decided to trust a small human woman with soft hands and a gentle voice. Sparks flew as cut through the metal door. The bulkhead groaned and fell inward, crashing to the floor. Light flooded into the corridor, painful after so long in darkness. Stood in the opening with a plasma cutter in one hand and a weapon in the other. His eyes were wide with fear and determination. Then he saw, and the fear shifted to confusion. Then he saw what she was sitting next to. The weapon fell from his hand and clattered against the floor. "What?" said slowly. "Am I looking at?" Smiled up at him. Her hand still rested on the Shrike's head. The creature watched with calm golden eyes, making no move to attack. "I made a friend," she said. Stared at her, then he stared at the Shrike, then he stared back at her. "You made a friend," he repeated. His voice was flat. "You made a friend with the thing that ate an entire capture team. The thing that has killed hundreds of creatures on its home world. The thing that is literally called an extinction-level threat." "Yes," said simply. Behind, other crew members were gathering. Could see their shadows, could hear their panicked whispers. Someone was going to do something stupid soon. She said, her voice becoming serious. "I need you to trust me. Tell everyone to put down their weapons and stay calm. The Shrike is not going to hurt anyone, but if they attack it or scare it, I cannot promise what will happen." Looked at her for a long moment. Then he let out a heavy sigh and turned to face the others. "Lower your weapons," he ordered. "Everyone just calm down." The chaos was only beginning. The corridor filled with people. Crew members pushed forward to see what was happening, and those in front pushed back when they saw the Shrike. Voices overlapped in a dozen different languages. Some screamed, some prayed, some simply stared in frozen disbelief. Commander pushed through the crowd. His insect-like body was tense, his compound eyes reflecting the light in hundreds of tiny images. When he saw sitting calmly beside the Shrike, he stopped so suddenly that the officer behind him crashed into his shell. "This is not possible," the commander said. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "And yet here we are," replied. He had positioned himself between and the armed crew members, his hands raised in a calming gesture. "Everyone just stay back. Nobody make any sudden moves." Dr. The squeezed her way to the front. She was a short alien with 4 arms and large dark eyes that seemed too big for her head. Her specialty was studying dangerous creatures, but even she had never worked with anything like the Shrike. "The human," she said, her voice shaking. "The human is touching it. It is letting her touch it. Why is it letting her touch it?" Looked up at the gathered crowd. The Shrike had risen to a sitting position beside her, its golden eyes moving from face to face, reading each person like a book. Its patterns had shifted from peaceful violet to a wary yellow. It could sense the fear and hostility radiating from the crew. "Please," said calmly. "You are scaring it. Put down the weapons." Commander's mandibles clicked together in what might have been a laugh. "We are scaring it. That creature has killed more living beings than any predator in recorded history. It fears nothing." "That is not true," said. "Everything fears something. It fears being trapped. It fears being alone. It fears creatures that point weapons at it." She stroked the Shrike's neck and the creature leaned into her touch. "Right now it is confused and frightened. If you attack it, it will defend itself. And it will win." Nobody moved. The tension in the corridor was so thick it felt hard to breathe. Doctor stepped forward slowly. Her forearms were empty, held out to show she meant no harm. "May I approach?" she asked. "I only wish to observe. I will not touch it." Looked at the Shrike. The creature's eyes followed Doctor, but its patterns did not shift to aggressive red. It seemed uncertain rather than threatened. "Move slowly," said, "and keep your voice soft." Doctor approached one careful step at a time. When she was close enough to see details, she stopped and stared. Her large eyes blinked rapidly as she processed what she was seeing. "The neural patterns," she whispered. "Look at its markings. I have studied this species for years. The glow patterns indicate emotional state. Red means hunting. Orange means anger. Yellow means caution." She paused, her voice filled with wonder. "I have never seen violet before. In all my research, no Shrike has ever displayed violet." "What does violet mean?" asked. Doctor shook her head slowly. "I do not know. The color was theoretical. Some researchers believed it might indicate a dormant social response, something the species evolved away from long ago, but we never had evidence it still existed." Commander stepped forward, though he stayed well behind Doctor. "Explain what you mean by social response, in small words." Doctor turned to face him, though her eyes kept darting back to the Shrike. "The Shrike evolved on Nix 7, a world where trust means death. Forming bonds with other creatures gets you killed. So the species became perfectly solitary. Each Shrike lives alone, hunts alone, and dies alone. They have no pack, no family, no companions." She gestured toward the creature. "But look at this. It is protecting her. It has decided she belongs to it somehow. This should be impossible." "Perhaps it is manipulating her," Commander suggested, "using some kind of chemical or psychic influence to control her mind." "I am not being controlled," said firmly. "I am sitting here because I choose to, and the Shrike is calm because I treated it with kindness instead of fear." The Shrike made a low, rumbling sound, and several crew members took frightened steps backward. But the sound was not aggressive. It was almost like agreement. Pushed his way closer to, he crouched down beside her, keeping his movements slow and his voice quiet. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "Your hands are bleeding." Looked at her palms. The cuts from the broken glass had dried, but they still stung. "I am fine. It is not serious." The Shrike turned its massive head toward. Its golden eyes studied him carefully. Froze, barely breathing. "Do not run," murmured. "Just let it learn your smell." Stayed perfectly still as the Shrike leaned forward and sniffed him. Its hot breath washed over his face. He could see every scale on its head, every glowing line beneath its skin. He could see the teeth, long and sharp, designed for tearing through armor and bone. But the creature did not attack. After a moment, it pulled back and made a soft sound. Its patterns flickered briefly to green before returning to violet. "What does green mean?" asked, his voice slightly higher than usual. Doctor checked her tablet with shaking hands. "I have no idea. There is no recorded instance of green either." Smiled. "I think it means you passed the test. It decided you are not a threat." Let out a long breath. "Great, that is great. I was definitely not terrified just now." Commander watched this exchange with unreadable eyes. His mandibles clicked together slowly as he thought. Finally, he spoke. "This situation is unprecedented. The specimen cannot be returned to its cage because the containment system is damaged. It cannot be killed because it would destroy half the ship before we brought it down. And apparently it cannot be separated from the human because it has decided to protect her." He paused. "What do you suggest, Doctor?" The hesitated. "I suggest we do nothing aggressive. We observe, we study, we try to understand what is happening here." She looked at. "And we keep the human close. She seems to be the only thing keeping the Shrike calm." "I can do that," said, "but I have conditions. No weapons near us. No cages, and no experiments that cause pain. If you want to study it, you do so with respect." Commander was silent for a long moment. Around him, the crew waited nervously. Some still held their weapons, hands trembling. Very well, the commander finally said. Doctor, you will lead the observation team. The human and the specimen will be assigned quarters on the science deck. Security will monitor from a distance, but no armed personnel within 50 meters unless absolutely necessary. Relief spread through his body. It was not perfect, but it was a start. Thank you, Commander. Nodded stiffly. Do not thank me. I am simply making the most logical choice. If that creature decides to go on a rampage, you are the only thing that might stop it. His compound eyes focused on her. I hope your friendship is strong, human. He turned and walked away. The crowd parted to let him through. Looked at the Shrike. It was watching her again, its golden eyes calm and trusting. She reached out and scratched behind what might have been its ears, and the creature made that deep purring sound again. Come on, she said softly. Let me show you your new home. The Shrike rose to its feet and followed her through the corridor. The crew members pressed themselves against the walls, eyes wide with terror. But the creature paid them no attention. It walked beside like a loyal shadow, its massive body moving with surprising grace. Fell into step beside them, shaking his head in amazement. You know, he said quietly, the entire galaxy is going to lose its mind when they hear about this. Smiled probably, but that is a problem for tomorrow. Behind them, Doctor was already dictating notes into her tablet, her voice fast with excitement. First observed instance of Shrike social bonding. Subject appears to have formed protective attachment to human female. Further study required. Hypothesis. Humans may possess unique qualities that trigger dormant bonding instincts in apex predators. Evidence. None of this should be possible, but I am watching it happen with my own eyes. The journey to the science deck was quiet. The Shrike stayed close to, occasionally bumping its head against her shoulder. By the time they reached their new quarters, something had changed on the starward. The most dangerous creature in the galaxy had found something it never knew it wanted. A friend. 3 days passed aboard the starward. 3 days of observation, scanning, and scientific confusion. Doctor barely slept. She filled tablet after tablet with notes, ran test after test, and questioned everything she thought she knew about xenobiology. The Shrike had settled into life on the science deck with surprising ease. It followed everywhere she went. When she ate, it curled beside her chair. When she worked in the laboratory, it watched from a corner with curious golden eyes. When she slept, it lay at the foot of her bed like a guardian watching over her dreams. The crew kept their distance. Armed security teams patrolled the area, but they stayed far back just as Commander had ordered. Everyone whispered when walked by with the massive predator at her side. Some whispered in fear, some whispered in wonder. Visited often. At first, the Shrike had watched him with suspicion, but over time, it began to accept his presence. Now it even allowed him to sit in the same room, though it always positioned itself between him and. It is protecting you, observed one evening, even from me. Smiled. She was reading through old Earth documents on her tablet while the Shrike rested its head in her lap. She scratched behind its ears, and it made that deep purring sound that had become so familiar. It does not see you as a threat anymore, she said, but it still sees you as someone outside its pack. I am inside. You are tolerated. Wonderful. I have been tolerated by an extinction-level predator. My mother would be so proud. Doctor entered the room, her 4 arms full of equipment. Her large eyes were bright with excitement, and her movements were quick and energetic. She had not looked this happy since the whole situation began. I have results, she announced. Finally, I have results that make sense. Well, they make sense if you accept that nothing makes sense. Raised an eyebrow. That is very scientific of you. Doctor ignored him and set up her equipment on the table. Holographic displays flickered to life, showing brain scans, chemical analyses, and complex diagrams that meant nothing to. I have been studying the Shrike's neural activity since it bonded with you, Doctor explained. At first, I could not understand what I was seeing. The patterns were completely foreign, but then I compared them to historical records from other bonded species, and I found something extraordinary. She pulled up an image of the shrike's brain. Certain areas were highlighted in bright colors. This region here controls social behavior. In every shrike we have ever studied, this area has been dark and inactive. The species evolved to be solitary. Their brains literally do not use these pathways anymore. She tapped the display and the colors changed. But look at your shrike. These pathways are active. They are functioning. Something has triggered ancient bonding instincts that should have been extinct for millions of years. Something said slowly, "You mean?" "Yes, but not just humans." Doctor pulled up another display, this one showing chemical compounds. When I analyzed its biological signature, I found several compounds that are unique to humans. These compounds interact with the shrike's sensory systems in unexpected ways. They trigger recognition patterns that the shrike should not have anymore. Frowned thoughtfully. "Are you saying there is something in my body chemistry that made the shrike trust me?" "Partially, but chemistry alone does not explain it. Many species have unusual biochemistry. What makes humans special is not what you are made of. It is how you behave." Doctor pulled up old Earth records. Images appeared in the holographic display. Wolves running beside ancient humans. Cats curled in human laps. Horses carrying human riders across open plains. Eagles perched on human arms. "I researched your," doctor said. "Earth is classified as a Class C death world. Extreme temperature variations, deadly predators, toxic plants, violent weather. Your species should not have survived." "We almost did not, several times," admitted. "But you did survive, and not just by fighting or running. You survived by doing something that no other intelligent species has ever done on such a scale." Doctor's voice was filled with amazement. "You befriended your predators. You took wolves and made them into dogs. You took wild cats and made them into companions. You took the creatures that should have killed you and turned them into family." Looked down at the shrike. It had been listening, she was sure. Its golden eyes moved between the speakers as if following the conversation. "We call them pets," she said softly. Doctor shook her head. "They are more than pets. They are evidence of something unprecedented. Your species evolved an instinct to form bonds with dangerous creatures. You can recognize fear in a predator and respond with calm instead of panic. You can communicate trust through body language and tone of voice. You can convince a killer that it would be better to stand beside you than against you." She turned to face directly. "When the shrike escaped, every other species on this ship ran or prepared to fight. That is normal. That is logical, but you stayed calm. You hummed a song. You spoke softly. You did not show fear. And somehow you triggered bonding instincts in the shrike that have been dormant for thousands of generations." Laughed, but it was not really a funny laugh. "So you are saying humans can make friends with anything because we grew up surrounded by things that wanted to eat us?" "I am saying humans are insane," Doctor replied. "But it is a useful kind of insane. You are so accustomed to living with death that you have learned to make peace with it. You do not see a predator and think enemy. You see a predator and think potential ally." Commander entered the room. He had been listening from the doorway, his compound eyes unreadable. "This is very interesting from a scientific perspective," he said, "but it does not solve our practical problems. The Galactic Union has learned about our situation. They are sending a delegation to study the phenomenon. Some factions want the shrike destroyed. Others want the humans studied in a laboratory. We have 3 days before they arrive." His hand stopped moving on the shrike's head. The creature sensed her tension and lifted its head, its patterns shifting to an alert yellow. "They want to take us apart," she said quietly. "Is that it? Study me like a specimen. Kill the shrike because they are afraid of what it represents." Commander was silent for a moment. Then he spoke in a voice that was surprisingly gentle. I have served the Galactic Union for 40 years. I have followed orders without question, but I have also learned that orders are not always right. He looked at the Shrike, then at, "What you have done here is impossible. It changes everything we thought we knew about predator species. It changes everything we thought we knew about humans." He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "When the delegation arrives, I will tell them that the Shrike cannot be separated from its human without risking catastrophic violence. I will tell them that both subjects must remain aboard the Starward for continued observation." His mandibles clicked in what might have been a smile. "These statements will be true. I simply may emphasize certain aspects more than others." He left. The room was quiet. Broke the silence. Did Commander just offer to protect you from the Galactic Union? Smiled. She looked down at the Shrike, and it looked back at her with those calm, golden eyes. "I think," she said, "we are building a very strange pack." The Shrike made a sound that was almost like agreement. Its patterns pulsed violet, soft, and peaceful. Then it lowered its head back into its lap and closed its eyes. For a creature from a world of eternal darkness and death, it looked remarkably content. Doctor watched this scene with her tablet in hand, still recording observations. Her voice was barely a whisper. "The human variable," she said. "I think that is what I will call my report. The unpredictable factor that no equation can account for. The ability to find friendship in the most unlikely places." She paused. "The galaxy is going to have to learn to live with it." Settled into a chair across the room, the Shrike opened one eye to watch him, then closed it again. "You know," he said, "where I come from we have a saying, if you cannot beat them, join them." Raised an eyebrow, "And if you cannot join them?" Grinned. "Then you befriend the biggest, scariest thing in the room and let it protect you." The Shrike's tail twitched. Maybe, just maybe, it was laughing. The delegation arrived on schedule. 3 ships from the Galactic Union docked with the Starward, carrying politicians, military officers, scientists, and diplomats from a dozen different species. They came with demands and questions and barely hidden weapons. They expected to find chaos and death. What they found was walking through the corridors, with the Shrike padding silently beside her. The lead diplomat was a tall named ambassador. He had scales of burnished copper and eyes that missed nothing. When he saw the human and the predator walking together like old friends, he stopped in his tracks and simply stared. "This is not what I expected," he said. Commander stood nearby, his posture straight and his voice formal. "As I stated in my report, Ambassador, the situation is under control. The specimen has formed a protective bond with the human crew member. Any attempt to separate them would likely result in significant casualties." "You expect me to believe that an extinction-class predator has become a pet?" Ambassador's voice carried disbelief. "This must be some kind of trick." Stepped forward. The Shrike stayed close to her side, watching the ambassador with alert golden eyes. Its patterns shifted slowly between yellow and violet, cautious but not hostile. "It is not a pet," said calmly. "It is a friend, and it is not a trick. The Shrike chose to trust me because I chose to trust it first." The ambassador looked at her like she was speaking nonsense. Behind him, his advisors whispered to each other, their expressions ranging from confusion to fear. "Young human," the ambassador said, "do you understand what you are standing next to? That creature has destroyed entire research stations. It has killed hundreds of soldiers. There is no record of any Shrike forming bonds with anything. They are perfect killing machines." "They are not machines," replied. "They are living creatures with feelings and instincts just like any other species. They come from a world where trust means death, so they learn not to trust, but that does not mean they cannot learn again." The ambassador opened his mouth to argue, but he was interrupted by Doctor, who pushed her way to the front of the crowd. "Ambassador," she said, holding up her tablet, "I have spent the past week studying this bond. I can provide you with brain scans, chemical analyses, and behavioral data that prove this connection is genuine. The Shrike has activated dormant neural pathways that have been inactive for millions of years. It has formed a social attachment to this human. This is not manipulation or illusion. This is biology. And what caused this biological impossibility? Doctor gestured toward. She did. Or rather, her humanity did. Humans evolved on a death world. They survived by forming alliances with predators instead of just fighting them. They have instincts for bonding with dangerous creatures that no other known species possesses. When this human encountered the Shrike, she responded with calm and kindness instead of fear and aggression, and the Shrike responded in turn. The ambassador was quiet for a long moment. His advisors continued to whisper, but he ignored them. His eyes moved between the Shrike, doctor, and commander. "If what you say is true," he said slowly, "then this changes everything. The Shrike species has always been classified as impossible to study or contain. They are considered a threat to any world they appear on, but if humans can actually communicate with them, bond with them, then perhaps they do not have to be a threat." Finished. Perhaps they just need someone willing to reach out. The Shrike made a low sound, almost like agreement. Its patterns pulsed with violet light. Ambassador stared at the creature. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, not fear but wonder. Then he composed himself and turned to Commander. "I will need to report this to the Galactic Council," he said. "But for now, I am ordering that the human and the Shrike remain aboard the Starward for continued observation. No attempts to separate them, no experiments without full consent, and no weapons allowed near them." Felt relief wash through her body. It was not complete freedom, but it was protection. It was a chance. "Thank you, Ambassador." He nodded stiffly. "Do not thank me, human. You have created more questions than answers. The Council will want explanations that I cannot give. Political factions will argue about whether this represents a threat or an opportunity. You have made my life very complicated." Smiled. "I am sorry about that. But I think complicated is better than simple when simple means killing something just because you do not understand it." The ambassador had no response to that. He turned and walked away, his advisors following close behind. Over the next few weeks, life aboard the Starward slowly returned to normal, or at least a new kind of normal. The Shrike became a familiar sight in the corridors. Crew members still gave it a wide berth, but the fear in their eyes gradually shifted to curiosity. Some even started talking to it, the way did, with soft voices and gentle words. The creature seemed to enjoy the attention. Its patterns displayed more colors than anyone had ever recorded. Green appeared often, especially around, who had somehow earned a position of trust. Blue showed up when Doctor approached with her tablets and scanners, and violet was always present when was near. One evening, sat in the observation lounge, watching the stars drift past the window. The Shrike lay curled beside her chair, its massive body relaxed, its golden eyes half closed. Sat across the room, working on a broken device with practiced hands. "You know," said without looking up, "I got a message from my sister on Earth today. She asked what I have been doing out here. I did not know how to explain that I spend my free time hanging out with a giant alien predator that could eat me in one bite." Laugh softly. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I made some interesting friends. She thinks I mean aliens, which is technically true." He glanced at the Shrike. "She would lose her mind if she knew the truth." "Most people would." "Most people are not humans." Set down his device and leaned back in his chair. "Doctor showed me her report. She sent it to the Galactic Science Council. They are calling it the biggest discovery in a century. Everyone wants to know how humans can bond with apex predators." Stroked the Shrike's head, and it pressed into her touch. "We do not really think about it," she said. "On Earth, it was just normal. We grew up with dogs and cats and horses. We told stories about wolves that raised human children and eagles that carried messages for kings. Living alongside dangerous animals is just part of who we are. That is what scares them, I think, the other species. His voice was thoughtful. They see humans as these soft, slow, vulnerable creatures. No claws, no armor, no natural weapons. And then they discover that we survive by making friends with the things that should kill us. It does not fit their understanding of the universe. Maybe the universe is more complicated than they thought. Maybe smiled, or maybe humans are just weird. The Shrike made a sound that was definitely amusement. Both humans turned to look at it. Did it just laugh at us? Asked. Grinned. I think it agrees that humans are weird. The creature lifted its head and pressed its nose against cheek. Its golden eyes were warm and trusting. Its patterns pulsed with violet light. You are one to talk, told it. You are supposed to be a mindless killing machine, and here you are cuddling like a cat. The Shrike made another sound, softer this time. Then it lowered its head back into her lap and closed its eyes. Watched the scene with an expression of amazed disbelief. The galaxy's deadliest predator, he said, reduced to a giant house pet. Not a pet, corrected gently. A friend, a companion, part of the pack. The pack, considered the word. You, me, and an extinction-class predator, that is some pack. Looked at him and smiled. The best ones always are. Outside the window, the stars continued their endless dance. Somewhere in the darkness of space, other ships carried the news of what had happened aboard the Starward. Other species debated what it meant. Other scientists scrambled to understand the impossible bond between human and Shrike. But inside the observation lounge, none of that mattered. There was only the quiet hum of the ship, the soft light of distant stars, and the peaceful sound of a predator purring in the lap of the human who had refused to be afraid. Rested her hand on the Shrike's warm scales and watched the universe drift by. We are not domesticating, she whispered, mostly to herself. We are just making friends. The Shrike's tail curled around her feet, and the galaxy's most lethal creature slept peacefully at her side. Some things, it turned out, did not need to be understood to be real. Some things just needed a little kindness.